Okay, I'm sure we might have some stragglers that want to join. We'll go ahead and kick it off, and this will be recorded and uploaded to the Envu US YouTube page after the fact. So if you miss any parts of this, go ahead and go to YouTube, and you'll be able to see it just a little bit after the webinar is done. My name's Chris. I'm with HLK, who does a lot of Envu's PR, particularly on IBM, and I am here to kick off this webinar on combating resistance through tank mixing. So today we have Shannon Clark, who is a solutions development and technical service manager Upper Plains for Envu, and she is going to walk through how to control for resistance through tank mixing, and then she's going to give you a little insight into Envu's new digital tool, the Mixmaster app, which if you haven't taken a look, it's on Apple, on the Apple Store and on Google Play Store. So go take a look if you haven't yet. It can help you find the right tank mix for your region and weeds you want to control. But without further ado, Shannon, I'll let you get into it. And throughout the presentation, if you have any questions come up, just go ahead and put them in the chat. I will be monitoring, and I will ask them to Shannon after the fact. Or if you want to wait till the presentation's done and then put them in the chat, that's totally fine too. But this is a good place to get any and all questions you have answered. So, Shannon.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks everyone for joining today. I've done several of these now, so you get to see me again, but hopefully it's a new topic for you or one that you've been wanting to learn more about. But I think resistance is it's a big issue facing applicators. And if you haven't run into it yet, then it's probably bound to happen at some point while you're doing, especially if you're working in the bare ground space or that IVM type space, as we call it. So I'm going to go through some of the issue to start with. Please don't get scared, like, oh my gosh, there's so much resistance. This is impossible, because I'm going to end the webinar with some great solutions for how we can preserve some of our current chemistries and just combat this resistance issue on these sites. So first, I'm going to just start with talking through some of the resistance issues that I've seen, showing a few site pictures. This is just an example of some of the things I've run into in the last few years, and then talk through kind of some of the issues going on here. So when we talk about some of the greatest challenges in especially the industrial vegetation management space, so this is where we're creating bare ground. We do run into resistance issues in even our roadside or rangeland applications, but bare ground, where we're really trying to control all vegetation, is a different type of application method, because you are trying to control everything there, and we are using a lot more chemicals year after year. So some of the main challenges here are there's a lack of really truly new innovation. This isn't only in the IVM space, this is in crops as well, where we have a huge problem with resistance, but there just hasn't been a lot of new chemistries. We went for several years where we were just finding new modes of action, new active ingredients, and then we went for about 30 years with actually no new mode of action discovered. So recently, within the last 5 years, there has been a new group 28, that was discovered, but before that, it was back in the 80s when our last group was introduced. So in the meantime, we have had some new active ingredients. So indaziflam or esplanade, if you've used esplanade, or method aminocyclopyrachlor, those are also the components in plain view. Those were released in around 2010 commercially, but those didn't represent new modes of action. They just brought some new active ingredients to the IVM space. Another challenge is that in this space, it costs so much to bring these new things to market, that oftentimes it really needs to be developed for more of the corn or soybean market, or something that's going to really provide a lot of income in the space. And the IVM space just doesn't provide that, where we can put that much money into development of discovering new modes of action. Resistance, that's the other issue we deal with, and that's what we're going to really delve into on this webinar. So here's just an example of some of the things you might see. And I apologize if you're from the East. I don't have any resistance pictures from the East. This is going to be more kind of the middle west of the country, because that is where I work, and that is where we see a lot of these plants that just confer more resistance, with the exception of Palmer, which you've probably dealt with if you're in the East. But kochia, so this is just an example from a site that had been sprayed with multiple modes of action. And as you can see in that picture on the right, still live plants there with dead plants nearby. And that's really a good indication that you could have a resistance issue. That doesn't always mean that you do, but that is, if you do have dead plants with live plants next to it, that can be an indication. Here's another site in, this is Western Kansas. So 4 modes of action sprayed for bare ground at this site. You can see that not good control achieved there. And then this is the site I'm really going to focus into. The last 2 sites, we had indications of some resistance issues going on. We did collect seed from that Kansas site and test it. We also collected seed from this North Dakota site, and that's what I'm going to walk through, what we kind of did here. So these photos were taken after 3 herbicide applications were made, which included 4 modes of action at the site, in a very big tank mix of chemicals, which I'm going to show next. But you can see the results here that we did have dead kochia plants. This is kochia, with very live green ones next to it. And so when I went out there, because of how many modes of action were used and 3 herbicide applications, it was kind of hard to believe that there would be, so, plants still hanging on and resistance, but we did collect seed to test that. So here's what was done. The application date was June 10th. That is a little late in terms of kochia. We do like to get our applications out either in the fall, which I'm going to go into at the end of this, or earlier in the spring. But sometimes in North Dakota, that June 10th might be the earliest you can get out. But we did have the combination of Esplanade method, Plateau, Roundup, and then E2 that was being sprayed at the site. There's already high levels of resistance known in these Western populations to things like Plateau, Roundup, and the components of E2, which are auxin herbicides. We do know, because it was sprayed June 10th post-emergence, we're not really getting the benefit from Esplanade in this tank mix, so we can't really rely on that for kochia control. So we were really not getting a great mix of chemicals that provided new modes of action to fight resistance that we know is out there. So then a second application went out, and then a third application when those ones just weren't working. Those escapes remained, so we collected plant samples and we sent those off to Colorado State to analyze some tissue samples, and then Utah State, we sent seed to analyze some other types of resistance. And so I'm just going to walk through the results of what we saw here. So we're going to go through some science on this, but I promise you don't have to get all into everything on this slide. This is mostly just to highlight some of the findings of how resistant these plants were. So when we look at the top, let me actually turn my pointer on here. That'll help us through. This was with the tissue samples we took, and so we're able to look at some resistance mechanisms through tissue sample. Some of them have to be done by actually growing seed in the greenhouse and spraying. So this is showing resistance to group 9, which is glyphosate, so like our Roundup products. Most of the plants collected were resistant to glyphosate. Group 2 herbicides, we had high levels of group 2 resistance in the populations collected, and then we also found dicamba resistance. This is what we call a target site resistance, so we can see that there's a mutation in the plant that's allowing this resistance to dicamba. Plants can also be resistance through what we call metabolic resistance, which confers resistance to products like dicamba as well. So there's actually multiple ways it can be resistant. So we tested that next. We grew everything in the greenhouse, or Utah State did for us. They had a known susceptible population that they sprayed to make sure they were getting control. And then we looked at that North Dakota roadside population. So this was actually collected not even from the direct site where we were failing to control the kochia, but it was collected from the roadside, which hadn't come into contact with those chemical applications from the applicator. So you can see that it survived the fluroxapyr application. MCPA, which is another auxin, survived that. Dicamba, our 2,4-D ester, 2,4-D amine, and then also 2,4-D choline. And then the Scorch EXT, which is a common thing that we've actually been suggesting for post-emergent kochia control, and not that we wouldn't continue to suggest adding a product like this in, but on its own, you can see this is made up of 3 what we call auxin herbicides or group 4 herbicides, and not controlling the plants on its own. Method or aminocyclopyrachlor, Weed Master, which is the combination of 2,4-D and dicamba, and then Roundup, which looks like it almost fertilized the plants when we sprayed. So they all showed resistance to Roundup applications. But what's really neat is the results here, and this is what we're going to really focus on at the end of this webinar, is that the pre-emergent application of Method plus Esplanade is the only thing that we were able to use to get control of this population so far. And we're continuing this work with other types of herbicides like Diuron, other PPO herbicides, or like our group 15s. And so we're continuing to see the level of resistance at this site. But the great news here is that with a pre-emergent application, we were able to get that control. And this was true with all the populations we tested across the US. So we tested several locations, and I'm just showing one because this was the highest level of resistance, but anything that did show resistance was controlled pre-emergent. So what's the impact of this to IVM? So, this is a little bit different than our crop resistance issue. We do have some kind of a benefit because in bare ground applications, we're not trying to protect a crop. So we're able to use a lot more tools available than having to worry about, killing our corn or soybeans. And so they've lost a lot of tools there. Also, they're making multiple applications throughout the season. A lot of times we're trying to get one application, get bare ground for the entire season. So we do have some more flexibility, but we do know species like kochia, Russian thistle, and Palmer amaranth specifically are and will continue to be a battle. There's high levels of resistance already in the population, and as these continue to spread, especially we see Palmer amaranth spreading west through the United States, and so now this is becoming more of an issue, like in eastern Colorado where it wasn't in the past, and through time it's only going to expand. They have it in Utah now that they're dealing with. So those are just going to continue to be an issue. So we do need to be forward thinking on this. Resistance and environmental conditions pose threats to getting control. So it's not just resistance as an issue, but things like dry conditions or getting out too late can pose challenges to applicators. We're seeing reduced efficacy of a lot of our previous go-to IVM herbicides. And so it's becoming, we're creating higher costs to achieve bare ground now. We're seeing a lot more resistant stacking in the population. That means like the plants I showed from North Dakota, they're resistant to multiple modes of action. So those plants have been shown to be resistant to our group 2 herbicides, our group 9 herbicides, our group 4 herbicides. So again, we need to be forward thinking, and that's what we're going to walk through today on this webinar. So at the end of 2024, Envu actually acquired the GSS portfolio, the Global Specialty Solutions portfolio from FMC. So that brought over a lot of new products, especially on the turf side of our industry. But we did acquire 2 products for the IVM market, which is Altify IVM and Portfolio IVM. Those are carfentrazone or sulfentrazone, if you've ever used any of those products. And so this was exciting because it brought a new, not a new mode of action. These are PPO herbicides. They've been around for a long time, but a new mode of action to Envu Pro applicators that we were able to add into the tank. And so this is where we're going to really delve in, well, not too far in, but talk about science for a second, and then we'll just look at some really fun pictures. But these PPO herbicides are group 14, and if you've used any similar ones, I wanted to show this on the screen to kind of compare what Portfolio and Altify are. So something like Detail, saflufenicil is a common one applicators might use. Flumioxazin, Payload, SureGuard. It's in a lot of other combinations like Piper Easy, Edict, and Venue. And then we have right here our sulfentrazone, carfentrazone, which is our Portfolio and Altify. They're in the same, they're all considered the same mode of action, but they have different chemical families within this. And so Portfolio and Altify represent the same chemical family, but PPO uses in VM, they bring a lot of benefit. So they're great for resistance management. We have less PPO resistance we do run into so far. They can provide a rapid burn down, broad spectrum control, but they're great because there's also compatibility and selective programs as well. So when we talk about maybe our industrial turf applications or selective roadside applications, these are great products that can be included in a different type of a mix because they don't impact those perennial grasses. So just walking through quickly a bit from the label on these. So Altify is labeled for actually both IVM and range and pasture. So it does bring a wide range of options. This is not going to have that soil residual. It's going to be really a good burn down product that we could add in. So it's not a standalone. It's something we would add into a program in either range and pasture or IVM roadside type sites. But really some good weeds controlled kochia, lamb's quarter, pigweed, velvet leaf. There's more on the label, but those are kind of some of the main ones we've been focusing in on. Some of the application considerations, this is for Altify, but also some of these for PPOs in general. We do want to focus on that pH spray solution of 5 to 8. PPOs will rapidly degrade when you get outside of that range of a pH of your solution. The application rate for Altify is 1/4 ounce to 2 ounces per acre. The max per application is 2 ounces, but in rights of way or industrial sites, we do have a max annual rate of 10 ounces, meaning you can go in with multiple applications if needed. It does have an aerial application for helicopter, a minimum of 10 GPA if you're going by ground, higher for heavier infestations. Portfolio, this one brings both soil residual and early post-emergent activity. So this is a really great product in that regards to cover that spectrum of application time. Target weeds, kochia, Palmer amaranth, Russian thistle, pigweeds, nutsedge as well. I know a lot of, this is where I'm going to talk to the Eastern people, even though my experience is more in the West. Nutsedge can be a huge issue on bare ground sites, and Portfolio brings that nutsedge activity that I think will be great to add into some of your mixes if you're currently not picking up your nutsedge. It is labeled in most states, but if you look at the top, you'll see that Alaska, California, Hawaii, and New York, it is does not have a label, but we're good in all the other states. This doesn't have a range and pasture use site, but all of our standard IVM or roadside type sites, it is labeled for. So now I'm going to just walk through some of the 2025 trials and demonstrations that we put out with some of our existing portfolio of products, plus the Altify and Portfolio as well. And so it's just, we had some good learnings, and I think we can use some of these to talk about managing for resistance. The driver weed species we really evaluated this past year was kochia, Russian thistle, and Palmer amaranth, since those are the ones we see the most issues with in terms of resistance. So we had a series of small plot trials, which were sprayed by a hand research sprayer set up to be replicated. And then we had some demos as well, which were sprayed with more commercial equipment, either like a UTV with a boomless sprayer or, boom type setup. So we had a combination of these across the United States. And so I'm going to show just pictures from some of these. And we actually even had a site in Alberta here as well. And so we were able to compare across different regions, across different precipitation zones, environmental conditions, which was great to evaluate. So the first one I'll start on is in eastern Colorado. So this was at a feedlot in Sterling, where we had a combination. We developed a trial program to look at plain view, our current recommendation for bare ground management. And then we added those different post-emergent products like the portfolio Altify. We looked at Banville or dicamba as well in these. And we also looked at a base of method esplanade. Some applicators use that over plain view. And so we wanted to kind of look at the combination of that as well and see what the addition of these portfolio or Altify did. This went out when it was post-emergent. And so this is the time of year when we start getting into it's going to be different. So it's hard to put a calendar day, I guess, on it. But for us in the West, to be like that late May timing where the weeds are emerged, they're bigger. This is when we get out of kind of our recommendation for plain view alone, where we really need to add that post-emergent product for, especially when targeting things like kochia, Russian thistle, because we really need to add in chemistry to get that burn down of those plants that are already growing. So yeah, applied May 1st, 20 gallons per acre. Early post on the kochia flickweed. It was pre-emergent for the Palmer amaranth, and there was some cheatgrass that hadn't emerged yet either. And so I'll just run through some pictures of the results. So here's our 9 treated. You could see a pretty good mix of the Palmer and kochia there. Pretty good infestation at that site. So when we look at, I really want to point out the plain view at that 48 ounce rate, because that's our mid rate. That's the common rate I think a lot of applicators are going out at. For new sites, we do recommend the high rate of 64 ounces, which did give us very good control at the site. But when we look at 95% bare ground with plain view at 48, we added that portfolio in, we had nearly 100% bare ground. So 4% improvement doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a bare ground applicator, you do know that any escapes show a lot, especially to your customers. And so if you can just even improve that to nearly 100% control, that's even better. Plus it adds a mode of action, it adds that resistance management, it adds that additional residual and post-emergent control. The plain view and Banville, I'm not sure what this might have just been a weird result, why it was looked a little bit worse than the plain view alone. And then we have our method at Esplanade and Portfolio, which also performed comparable to the plain view plus Portfolio. And then a common one that other people might be using, but TerraView and Piper EZ seemed to break at all of our sites that we did put that treatment out. And I will note that all treatments did have Roundup Pro added in and NIS as well. So this was a demo done at the same site, but it was done with the commercial applicators equipment. And so the commercial applicator has been using a standard program of Plainview Scorch EXT plus Detail, which is over here. And we wanted to see if Detail is a PPO group 14 herbicide, but we wanted to see if replacing it with Portfolio looked similar or even better. And we did see that in this demo. It did improve the bare ground a little bit. And all these treatments performed well, but that one performed nearly 100% control on that one. This was another small plot study sprayed with a research sprayer on the ground. And this is where we were looking at just method compared to method plus the addition of Portfolio or Altify. We wanted to see what those products were bringing specifically to just method. We know method is a great product. It's broad spectrum. It has great soil residual, and it is really a foundation in bare ground programs. We don't want you to take that out, but we do know that when it comes to post-emergent like Palmer or kochia, relying just on method is not a good idea because of the amount of resistance that is out there already to auxin herbicides, group 4 herbicides. But also method just doesn't work that great on larger, once the plants get above like 2-4 inches. It just really doesn't provide a great burn down on kochia and Palmer, and so in Russian thistle as well. So we wanted to look at, okay, what can we add that portfolio in and just improve that post-emergent control? This was put out in mid-June, later than we would recommend for bare ground applications. But that's just when we could get out to the site, but I think it provided a good test of these chemistries. So here's looking at 63 days, so a couple months after treatment, we do see, method did okay, 88% kochia control, 85% kochia control, good on the Russian thistle. But when we added that portfolio in, whether we had NIS or MSO, 100% control on that from the ground or the research sprayer application. We saw Altify wasn't bumping that up as much. This one maybe is more surfactant related. But when we had the three-way, again, looked very, very good with the combo. So overall, at 63 days after treatment, we see that anything with portfolio, 99 to 100% control of that Russian thistle, kochia. There was also some field bindweed at the site. So at the same site, we also we used a commercial applicator, a UTV with a boomless sprayer down here. Boomless sprayers are hard because we know that coverage, even when we calibrate and work with it, it just is not as consistent as using a boom application. But we do know that boomless sprayer or boomless applications do have to go out. There's areas where you just can't get in with a boom sprayer. But this one was, again, looking at method plus the addition of portfolio or Altify, and then the combo of the three-way. And MSO is used in all these treatments. And so when we look, this is, I think, a couple months after treatment as well, we see that we had actually not great kochia control with just the method application. But when we added that portfolio into the application, it brought our control way up. So the control's down a little bit from that research hand boom, which just has much better coverage. But still, these numbers are, you can see the bump in control is very impressive here with this boomless nozzle application. And so when we looked, so I guess that was 1 month I was just showing you, I apologize. We look at 2 months after treatment, the control with method alone did go up, but with the portfolio, we achieved actually 100% control on our applications. And I would say one benefit to looking at this, even though we did achieve decent control with the method alone, it took a lot longer. Method is slower acting. We do know that. So you do get that addition of that quicker burn down with these PPOs. This is the only study we were actually able to get out a fall application in when we first found out that we were acquiring these FMC products. And so we were able to quickly spray a fall application. We had a combination of a lot of different things, but Plainview Esplanade method as bases, or even actually just Esplanade as a base in some cases. And so I wanted to point out just a few learnings from here. The Plainview plus portfolio performed fantastic. 100% control in that spring application, where if we look at Plainview alone in the spring, 96, that's not bad, but still a bump to 100% is better. But I also wanted to point out Esplanade plus portfolio, because this is a great option that I want to point applicators to that do any sensitive bare ground work. So if you're around trees, trailheads, parking lots, things like that, where you need a more sensitive bare ground, this is a great option. Fall or spring performed well. All of these treatments did have Roundup in them as well for burn down, but really relying on the residual here of Esplanade, and then portfolios providing some additional residual. So I wanted to point your attention to that, because going forward, we've recommended Esplanade plus Roundup as a great sensitive bare ground area, but portfolio will give you that addition of some post-emergent control. This was a small plot demo that was done in Western Kansas. And so this was a gravel pit application, looking at Plainview again, plus Plainview plus portfolio. And this is where we really, I think, saw that addition of portfolio providing a great benefit. And so this was applied May 21st. So it's a later bare ground application. We really like, again, we recommend to get out earlier, fall if possible, but earlier in the season in the spring. So this was a little bit later, but we see the addition of portfolio brought that bare ground to nearly 100% control, or 100% in some cases. We had MSO and NIS in this application. And then I did want to show one picture from a study we did with more of an industrial turf, I'd call it, or you could even say a roadside application where we were leaving the perennial grass. And so we wanted to look at tolerance to perennial grass and, the ability to use Altify for burn down. And so we did have a pretty dense kochia cover. We had some field bindweed, Russian thistle, so kind of a mix of species here. And we look at Altify 1 to 2 ounces. I really didn't see a difference between 1.5 to 2 ounces of Altify in any program I looked at this year. So I'd say these rates are very similar in their performance. But we did get pretty decent burn down of the kochia and field bindweed. This picture is taken, I think, about 6 weeks after treatment, and I should put that up here, but I do want to flip to the next picture and show you why you want to add Altify into a program and not just use it on its own. And this is why right here. So this is 4 months after the application. So you can see the kochia cover really has gone up a little bit, Russian thistle cover as well. And that's because Altify just doesn't bring any soil residual. And so, we had new germination of plants, or some of the plants that had germinated in the last pictures were now bigger. So the cover was just more, but just want to show you that it's a great burn down option, great selectivity on those grasses, but we do want to combine it in a program. I'm just going to quickly show a few demonstrations from some of our ASMs. And so you probably know some of them. So this is Jerry Ellis. He's out in Washington. This was done on kochia, 3.5 to 5.5 feet tall. So a very late kochia timing, a mix of Altify, a glyphosate product, water conditioner, Vista or fluroxapyr, and then MSO is the surfactant. This was done by an ATV. So here is, and I'm sorry for the fuzzy pictures, but what the kochia looked like at application. So very large, very mature. Here's 25 days after application. And then here's 67 days. So even with very large kochia where it wouldn't be the recommended timing to be applying, still able to achieve a great burn down with a mix of adding that Altify in to the fluroxapyr and glyphosate. This was done by Myron it was in White Oak, Texas. It was, again, July 3rd. So mature post-emergent weeds. It was a combination of Altify, Escort, and Notiva. It was done with a Roxor sprayer, the Boom Buster tip. So at 25 GPA. And this was the control ratings. I'll show a picture next, but pretty decent control on most everything. The Western ragweed did have initial control, but had some regrowth. And then here's the treated and untreated. So it did provide a great burn down in that mix to the Escort. And then the last demo from Jesse Peary in Pennsylvania is where this one went out on the Turnpike. They use a base mix of Esplanade method, Polaris, Escort, Roundup, and water conditioner. And so what Jesse did was have them add the portfolio and Altify to that base mix to see if there was improvement in control. The targets were grasses and broadleaf weeds, mostly kochia. Just a background on the site, the base mix has performed really well with the exception of kochia. So that's one thing they were continuing to miss in their applications. Their application timing has been historically later than what, just because of how they can get out than what we would normally recommend on kochia. They've had little to no control in 2024 treated areas with that base mix alone on the kochia specifically. So that was the at the time application. That picture is showing what the plants looked like. Here's 2 weeks after treatment. We see excellent burn down. And this is really from the contribution of the Altifian portfolio, providing that quick burn down. And then here's 67 days after treatment. Control is on the right, and then the treated on the left there. And you can see it looks very clean. They were very happy with the outcome. So in summary from our demos and what we learned, the addition of portfolio to those base mixes of Plainview or Esplanade method really controlled the improved control of those important weeds that we do see higher levels of resistance to. So that kochia, Russian thistle, Palmer amaranth. And it provided another effective herbicide mode of action, so a group 14 for resistance management. Altify at 1.5 to 2 ounces did provide good kochia and Russian thistle burn down. It has great safety for perennial grass. But again, it is one that is not standalone. It needs to be added to a mix to just improve burn down of your base mix. And so both portfolio or the combination of portfolio and Altify is a great option to add into either your sensitive bare ground sites or selective roadside treatments, or even your full industrial bare ground mixes. So we're just going to go through a few best practices for managing resistance. So we talked a lot about adding additional modes of action, but there's some other best practices we can put in place in our programs to really help us combat resistance of these sites. So first off, know your sites, know your weeds. You'd really need to be creating tank mixes that are targeting the weeds at your site. So for example, if you have something like kochia, we do know that certain chemistries like group 2 herbicides are really not effective. Most kochia is resistant to that. And so you can know when planning your mix that, okay, that group 2 herbicide in here, it really is not targeting my kochia, and I need to make sure I have a few other modes of action that are targeting the kochia in this mix. You want to tank mix at least 2 effective sites of action, but tank mixes are always better than rotating your modes of action year by year. You want to make sure you're applying at the labeled weed stage and rate. We do want to be trying to get out as early as possible, and that's going to help us when we're trying to spray really big kochia. That's where we can have resistance issues start to pop up when we don't get complete control on these weeds. And we really want to use pre-emergent herbicides in conjunction with post-emergent. And that means getting out at a timing that is a pre-emergent timing to rely on those herbicides. Otherwise, they're not providing benefit in your application. And control any escapes early. So why are pre-emergent herbicide programs so beneficial to controlling for resistance? Well, the majority of resistant weeds are annuals or biennials. I would say mostly annuals, because they rely on seed spread. And so that's how they're able to confer resistance so quickly in a population compared to our perennial plants. And so this is where we really want to rely on the pre-emergent herbicides, which target the seed bank and help us reduce the seed bank, where we don't have to just rely on getting that post-emergent control. And so what's the best application timing? We've done a lot of research in this area, and really the earlier is the better. And so you can just remember that phrase from this, earlier the better. And if you look at this, this is a great example of a trial we did. It was over 10 years ago at this point, but we had a series of these across Colorado where every herbicide combination treatment was sprayed in both the fall and the spring. And so what you're looking at here is the same treatment applied in the fall or on the left, the spring, and you can see just consistently better control in the fall. That doesn't mean we can't achieve better control than this in the spring, but this is relying on a large residual program in which the herbicides were able to get out there. They were able to get the sufficient moisture they needed before germination occurred. And so that fall provided the better control. And so again, I mentioned tank mixing, but I just wanted to show the science said that science has shown that resistance is less likely to occur when we are tank mixing multiple modes of action compared to either rotating or using no resistance management strategy. Now, The 83 times this was done on amaranthus species, so something like palmer or our pigweeds, but still that number, we will delay it a lot longer when we do use effective tank mixes. So what can we do? What options do we have? How should we kind of work our programs? So our recommendation number one is going to be to switch as much work to fall or winter pre-emergent timing. So depending on where you are in the country, it was very warm in Colorado this year, so we were actually still doing pre-emergent timings at the end of December because we had no snow and it was 60 degrees. It's not going to be like that every year here, but if you are in areas that are warmer, I mean, you can be doing these through the winter. We're not seeing that resistance issues with those pre-timings like I showed earlier. Recommendation number two would be to apply our post-chemistry, utilize post-chemistry beyond glyphosate. Sorry. Best option is to use a PPO added into the tank mix with our other kind of base mixes. We're using either Plainview, Esplanade method. We can also use these auxin mixes. There is auxin resistance out there, but they still provide a good option for management because not every plant's going to be resistant to your auxin herbicide. So those can still be used and they're great options. But you do need to start warning your customers that late applications, so kochia over 4 inches or palmer or whatever, when it starts getting later in the season, you're not utilizing the best chemistry. We're at that point, we're not utilizing our pre-emergent chemistry. So quickly go through this so I can get to the Mixmaster app, which I want to show you. But here's just kind of a calendar. Again, it's hard to put a calendar on the whole United States, but again, the August to maybe January, that's our fall winter pre-emergent timing. This is our highly recommended timing. We could take advantage of all of our chemistries, especially our pre-emergents. Spring bare ground, we're still getting some effectiveness out of pre-emergents for the weeds that aren't up yet, but we do need to add those post-emergent chemistries in. Sometimes we don't receive timely precipitation. June, July, or when your plants are getting very large, this is a high risk. We're definitely not taking advantage of our residual herbicides at that point, and we're relying purely on post-emergent applications or chemistries. So just some different bare ground site applications. Our hard bare ground, really Plainview is a great all-in-one. It's pre-mixed for you. It has 3 modes of action. You can add Roundup or glyphosate to it. You can add these other PPO herbicides, but Method Esplanade also a great base mix. Sensitive bare ground sites, like I talked about, that option of just putting Esplanade as your base and then adding some of these portfolio or Altify as a good burn down plus residual program. And then our backpack bare ground applications, kind of a similar thing to our sensitive bare ground sites, that base of Esplanade with the portfolio Altify and glyphosate. So now I'll just spend the next few minutes on the Mixmaster tool, and then we'll have a good amount of time for questions. But here's the QR code. I'll leave this up for just a second in case you want to scan it. So Apple or Google Play Store. This is a new app we just released to help applicators in terms of determining your tank mix, calibration resources, and other types of things like labels and other guides. Okay, so when you go into Mixmaster, I tried to walk through this and screenshot it for you. It is very user-friendly. I was even impressed when I downloaded it and started playing around with it. It is very easy to use, I feel like, and provides a great tool for just designing your tank mixes on the fly. When you're out in the field, you can use it. I'm not going to go through the calibration calculator, or there's other resources down here, like labels and things that you can access, but we're just going to go through the tank mix tool on this one. So this is how the app looks like on the home screen. You'll click tank mix. It will bring this up. So you can choose from a list of products. You can actually save your previous tank mixes that you've walked through and done. So if you have a few that you use consistently, just save them in here and they'll be ready to go. But this is where you start adding your products. So when you choose from your list of products, you can choose any Envu product is preloaded in there. And then we have custom product where you can choose something that's outside of the Envu portfolio. So you'll choose your products. In this case, I chose plain view. This gives you the option to view the labels. So we have the labels for our products. You'd have to access the other custom products on your own for labels, but we do have ours in there. I put the application rate here. I put 48 ounces. This is where you'd have the option to add another product. So I added a custom product in this scenario. I did Roundup Pro concentrate, 64 ounces per acre. And so then that's what I created as my tank mix. And then you'll enter your tank data. So your spray area, I decided I was going to spray 10 acres. I had a 100-gallon tank, and my application volume was 30 gallons per acre. And it spits out, I need 3 tanks, my total spray volume, 300 gallons. And this is how much total product I'm going to need to cover my 10 acres. And so then again, I can access the product label for any Envu products and have that on the fly while I'm out in the field. I'm quickly able to do this. So then again, there's the calibration section that you can walk through different types of calibration, whether that be from a backpack to a boom sprayer to a boomless sprayer. It just gives you an easy tool to use while you're out there doing it in the field. And so with that, I left plenty of time for questions. I know sometimes you think of questions after, and so there's my email or phone number. And so you are welcome to give me a call, email me, and I can provide you with any resources from this presentation or answer any questions. So with that, I guess, Chris, if you want to let me know, or whoever, if there's questions.
I gotcha. We do have a couple questions in the chat. So the first one is, excuse me, how much rainfall is required for indaziflam to be fully active in the soil for maximum control? And then I think there are a few follow-ups based on that first question.
Okay, yeah. So our label is a 1/4 inch of rainfall. And that was within the first 2 months of application is what we say. And so, yeah, that can come in multiple rainfall events, but a 1/4 inch is what's needed to really activate it completely in the soil.
Okay. The same person asked a couple other questions. I'll just roll through these. Is method an effective pre-emergent in controlling herbicide resistance, hairy fleabane? And then how effective is indaziflam pre-emergent on this same weed?
So I'm not too familiar with hairy fleabane, but in terms of controlling it with method, but so I don't know if it depends on what it's resistant to, I guess. So if it was resistant to group 4 herbicides or auxins, maybe not. But if not, I would imagine it would control it. And I don't know, Jerry, I know you're on here. If you know anything on hairy fleabane, chime in. That's not a weed species we have in my area. But generally, if something is resistant post-emergent, we can get better control with pre-emergent application. So for example, I like to use this one, dicamba, we see resistance to kochia with dicamba post-emergent, but oftentimes we can control those same plants pre-emergent with dicamba. So I'd say your best bet is still that pre-emergent application, but I'm just not too familiar with resistant hairy fleabane. I don't know if you know anything, Jerry.
I don't know on that one either. So
if you send me a message, whoever asked that question, I can put you in contact with like one of our Eastern solutions development or technical services person that could provide a lot more information on hairy fleabane.
Yeah, it's in the sunflower family. So what I would assume that the method in the Plainview should control it. So
yeah, and I'm just not sure on the resistant biotypes of that one.
I'll go ahead and toss in the map too of ASMs into the chat. So with that has their email, so they can the question can be posted directly to that region's specific person. So I'll do that in the chat in just a second. I did get one question about why curly dock breaks through Plainview.
Yes. Yeah, curly dock is one that breaks through Plainview, but we have options. So Escort is great, or Simplus if you used our Simplus product, or even another auxin that's in the Morphinoxy family. So like a dicamba 2,4-D, those generally bring great control to curly dock. I don't know why that plant family, the Polygonaceae, I always say that wrong, but it's an odd plant family. We don't have a lot of plants in that. But it for some reason breaks through the Plainview treatments. That is one I've noticed. But yeah, again, great options by adding in something like Escort. Easy to do, cheap, and it should pick up all your curly dock.
Perfect. Got another question. You stated method is not good post-emergence on kochia, but is pre-emergence. Can you address its post-emergence control versus pre-emergence control on bindweed and or best bindweed timing for method?
Yeah, method is excellent post-emergent on bindweed, so that is one that's still very susceptible. I think kochia in general is just not easy to control post-emergent with a lot of herbicides. But yeah, for some reason with method, it's just the difference in species, I guess. When we get kind of that 4-inch, over 4-inch, I would say it's not great on kochia, but on bindweed, still great. And that spring timing, that April, May, you'll get March, depending on when your bindweed is up and growing, you'll get very good post-emergent activity of method. It is, I would say, for field bindweed, method, aminocyclopyrrochlor, the active ingredient, is the best product for that plant species. It's its specialty, I would say.
Perfect. Next question. I apologize, I might butcher these chemistries, but when the pronunciation, when talking about introducing different modes of actions / chemistries, how effective would it be taking older chemistries like diaron or tebuthurion and reworking the adjuvant and carrier packages to make them more appealing to applicators, for example, reducing off-target drift, leaching, or sensitive site uses?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'll start off with, there is, so diaron's like a PS2 chemistry, and there is high level resistance that we kind of saw with the diaron when we were using it. But one thing that's interesting in kochia is that when you go away from using it, the plants will become susceptible in the population again, because there is what we call a fitness penalty that they carry to that chemistry. And so oftentimes we do see diaron, if you're using something like diaron consistently, you will start getting resistance at the site, getting less control. But if you take a break for a while, you can go back and sometimes get control with that chemistry. So there's been also some issues with the rate of use. So it's such a high use rate, a dry product, that you do have to mix and agitate well, and you're carrying a lot of product around to do these bare ground applications. So I know a lot of people got away from diaron, and then plus the environmental aspect of it. And I think there are probably more restrictions coming down from EPA soon on like diaron chemistries, because it can leach and move off of site. But that is a good, interesting comment on making it more user friendly, and it could be an option. It does add a different mode of action to some of the other bare ground mixes we're using if you're not using a PS2 chemistry. So yeah, very good. I don't know what it would be like to formulate something that wouldn't leach as much, or that would maybe like a lower use rate compared to the amount that has to be used right now.
I'm the opposite in my area. We use Crovar 30 years in a row, which has diaron in it, and we went away from some of those sites for 5 years and went back, and the kochia blew through the diaron in my spot. So and then when it comes to tebuthyron, which is spike, on their label, it says every 3 years. And I've always used Spike with like Esplanade or Spike Diaron, and it worked good. So, but people, those aren't our products, so we really can't mention much about reformulating and do that. So, those are Corteva and Alligari products. So.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not going to revert back to susceptibility at every site. I'm just saying it's kind of an interesting thing we have seen happen, but not to say if you've used Diaron for 30 years at a site, then you might have a huge resistance issue at that point.
The same with the Mazapir. We used to use a lot of Mazapir with Diaron, and after 3 years, Russian thistle blows through it. And it doesn't change if you take off 5 years and come back. It will blow through it again. So.
Okay, Shin, I have one last question in the chat. Unless anybody else tosses anything in there. But what works well on hound's tongue in California?
Yeah, so hound's tongue, I've had good success with the SU herbicide, so that'd be like our Telar Escort, or Sim
No
Plus.
Escort, no Escort in California.
I was just gonna say that. Thanks, Jerry. That's why you're on this call for me.
Yeah.
So I guess another SU chemistry. So Telar would be a great option for hound's tongue, and actually, depending on what site, Esplanade, Rejuva, if you're in range or roadside, provides great pre-emergent control of the seeds of hound's tongue. So you could even do a combo of Esplanade Telar and get really good results. But the auxin herbicides too, like a 2,4-D dicamba can be added in. That Telar plus 2,4-D would be a great option.
And on the hound's tongue, because it's hairy like common mullein, you need to add a MSO silicone surfactant in there to help with that.
Yes.
And you can mix it with milestone too. We've had milestone and Telar mixes that work good on hound's tongue too.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one last question for you, Shannon.
Yep.
How effective is a proper rate of surfactant in helping to combat resistance?
Yeah, I think it's an important component for post-emergent applications. When we're talking about pre, it doesn't matter as much on the surfactant, but yeah, in order to reduce escapes at the site, surfactant's really important to help the post-emergent chemistry move through that plant cuticle, especially on some of these, like kochia is very hairy, and so that can help penetrate that. So yeah, very critical on resistance management because we're trying to achieve the best control with our application, and that's going to help you achieve the best control by adding the proper surfactant. But generally, an NIS or MSO, like on some cases, if you have weed species that need more of an MSO, you don't need crazy surfactants in your mixes generally. Usually, I would say most bare ground applications can go out with one of those surfactants. And we actually don't recommend more aggressive surfactants if you're using like an Esplanade in your mix anyways.
All righty. Well, thank you to everybody who hopped on this webinar. We really, really appreciate you joining us and learning a bit more about how to combat resistance through tank mixing. Thank you to Shannon for a great presentation. Again, this will be up on the Envu US YouTube page in just a little bit. So if you missed anything, you can go back and watch. And also don't forget to go check out that Mixmaster app, which is available on the App Store and Google Play Store. So thank you, everybody.